I've been asked before how I set up my resume for job applications as a medical technologist, and so I thought I'd put this up there if anyone wants ideas. As a caveat, I have never been involved in the hiring process, so I don't know what HR people like look for when they do hiring. But this is just the way I like to set things up. Um, so, of course, start with your name. Want that really big. Want people to remember who you are, and phone number and email address. When I started working, we this is gonna date me, but we were told to put our home address on resumes and buy fancy paper to print them off, so you could hand your potential employer a fancy, like thick sheet of paper with some of them have like watermarks and stuff. And I don't think I have ever given an employer a hard copy of my resume. Everyone wants it emailed. You show up and they just have it printed off. So, yeah. Yeah, I don't put my address on my home address on here anymore, but do have a phone number, email address, um, so that I can be easily contacted. Make sure your email address is something professional. You don't want to have like dragon riders are awesome 234, because of course someone already has that at gmail.com, right? So yeah, use your first last name at, if you still have your university email, you can do that, or even you can still use gmail.com. I feel like Hotmail is more professional so than Gmail, but as long as it's like your name and not something fun, then it's good for a resume. Anyway, email address. And I like to do a skills-based resume, start with the skills and qualifications before I get into work experience. I figure employers are going to be looking at a bunch of resumes. They're going to spend like, in the first 5 seconds, they'll know if they want to hire someone or not. Is that horrible? So I like to put right at the top, this is my ASP certification. I'm actually not a medical technologist. I'm a technologist in chemistry. So I guess I'm not just some random med tech. I'm a chem tech, whatever. Anyway, so if you have the ASP certification, I put this first, and they come with this isn't my ID number, but they do come with ID numbers that you can. I think you can look it up on the ASCP website. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but I put my ID number on there. So if someone wants to look it up, they can see this is not my expiration date. That'd be cool. I'd never certify again. State certification, California and New York, I think too, requires state certification if you have it. I feel like this is what employers look for first. I actually did have a job where the employer just wanted my certification on their wall so they could pass inspections, pretty much. So, I mean, yeah, I did a good job, but they hired everyone. If they ask for, or okay, so after certification, I put my bachelor's degree. I actually don't have a bachelor's degree in medical laboratory science. Mine's in a different science, and I trained into the field. But whatever you have your bachelor's degree, put that there. And then your experience. So this is my professional experience. If you have professional experience, I feel like a lot of employers are fine with hiring new employees. So if you don't have, if this is your first job that you're applying for, then right here I would put like what laboratory or university program I trained in, right? So that they know you have some experience in a lab, which you should have, if you have a degree, or if you have, the certification, then you have a laboratory experience. Yeah, I would use whatever title the company is using. So I'm gonna switch tabs and look at just some job posting I found for Quest, because everyone works at Quest at some point, right? Yeah, so here in the, I don't know, talks about the job, whatever, and qualifications. These are your basic what you need to work there. So they put first education or qualified as a technologist. That's why on my skills resume I put the certification first and the bachelor's degree, and then if they require work experience, preferred. I found a lot of them don't require it, but it's preferred. So that's the next thing that I write right at the top of my skills, is if I have work experience. And I would use whatever term they use, right? So this one is for a medical laboratory scientist. One, you don't need the one. So I would put medical laboratory scientist here instead of clinical laboratory scientist. And then I just say, like, this is how many years experience I have. I've worked in biotech reference labs and hospitals. I actually haven't worked in hospitals, so my resume doesn't have that. But wherever you've worked, right? Like, adjust this to where you actually have worked. Instruments. Yeah, so I like to put in instruments, tests, and computer skills, because these are the things that I always get asked about on interviews. Like, well, what instruments have you worked with? What tests did you run when you were at whatever laboratory? And some places ask about computer skills, but it's always appreciated if you can at least use a barcode scanner hooked up to Excel. Like, if you can type in Excel, they're happy. Instruments. I list pipettes first. That might seem funny, but that is the only thing I have done, like, as a practical in a work interview. I've actually had this a couple times. Like, people have asked me, can you use pipettes? Like, yeah, I can use pipettes. And for one interview, there actually was a pipette and a 96 well plate that had water, right? Like, okay, use, and the pipette was just sitting down, like, they're not going to touch it. All right, use the pipette to move water from one well to another. I'm like, okay. And I wanted to sound impressive. So I pick up the pipette and I look at, what it's set to. And I ask him, oh, is, 500 microliters okay? Or do I need to adjust this? And they smile. No, it's fine. You can do it just like that. I'm like, all right. Used all my pipetting skills. I get the punch down up to the stop, get the water and carry it over, and then punch down and let the one little drop go on the side. Yeah, there's like a whole thing. They were impressed. I think that's for a job I got hired for. I don't remember. But anyway, sounds ridiculous, but this is the one I get asked about the most. And then I like to put other things that I've used. So if you're fresh out of training, ones that you trained on at the university, after you've got a few years of professional experience, I don't like to list the ones I trained on, because I wouldn't be able to use them if I sat down at it, right? So just, yeah, I mean, you can add a lot of stuff here. I try to keep it 2 lines, everything, 2 lines, 1 or 2 lines, right? I don't want to be overwhelming. Just, yes, I can pipette, and hey, look at me, I've used some other instruments. You don't need to list all of them. You can do that down in your work experience, just the ones that you feel are more common, more impressive, whatever. Tests. So yeah, I've trained in all areas of, for me, it's chemistry at, my work. And just to tell them I have, familiarity. And then I like to say professional experience, because that says this is more in depth, right? So professional experience with sample to answer PCR, hematology differentials, urinalysis, which I actually don't have because I'm in chemistry, and COVID PCR testing, because everyone did COVID. Computer skills. So computer skills are really important in the lab. There are a lot of people in the laboratory who are cautious about using the computer, and some of them maybe don't have very good skills. You don't have to be a computer programmer to list computer skills. All right, I've worked with multiple LIMS software packages. Okay, so LIMS is really straightforward. You like scan your barcode and you put in your results. Like it's not that complicated. But employers, like especially HR people who aren't in the lab, are like, oh, we work with LIMS. That's great. And um, I was toying with the idea of becoming a data analyst for a while. So I actually do have experience with making formulas and charts in Google Sheets and Excel. But I think this kind of, making formulas and charts, this is not something that you're going to be doing in your regular workday, but it puts you in a different level. It's like I can, one level is being able to type in Excel and scan barcodes, and the other level is making formulas and charts. That sounds impressive. But if you can do that, then people know that you can handle Excel and you're fine. You're probably not going to be making macros in your work, so don't worry about it. I actually had a job that most places use Excel, but I did have one place that used Google Sheets. It's like a startup company. Interesting. Anyway, work experience. I like to go most recent to the oldest because usually my most recent experiences are the more impressive. They're when I have a little more like leadership responsibilities. And here I use the actual term that was used at the company. So California, they use the term clinical laboratory scientist. And this is what I did. I tested NP swabs for COVID, and oh yeah, the liquid handler was connected to a LIMS system because a lot of, it goes back to looking at what they want, right? So if they say in job responsibilities, if they say LIMS, then you add anytime you use LIMS. This one says like specimen handling and processing, test analyses, maintaining records. So I'm gonna, try and work those things in. HIPAA, I feel like everyone uses HIPAA, but definitely if you've been involved in any sort of like CLIA, or I wouldn't list HIPAA training. If you're new, you can list your HIPAA training, but I feel like 3 years in, everyone knows that you take HIPAA training. Anyway, so basic troubleshooting, maintenance of the machine. I trained new employees. I feel like that's impressive. And there was one thing I suggested that reduced training time by like 2 to 3 days. So I was really proud of that. I'm going to put that on there, even if I'm not applying for a leadership position. This is a cool experience. So we were recording all of the maintenance errors in a Google Sheet. And because I was, fiddling around with this idea of becoming a data analyst, I wanted to have on my resume that I made a Google Sheet dashboard in a professional setting. So, it was COVID testing when, so anyone who worked in COVID testing knows that when COVID testing went down, like you didn't do COVID testing anymore. And I worked at a laboratory that only did COVID testing. So we did nothing. So I had time. And I looked up online how to make a Google Sheet dashboard. And I made a little bar chart that showed, what instruments and what errors they were getting. Very simple. And because I wanted that on my resume. We actually, like I showed it to the lead and he was like, oh, this is so cool. And he showed it to the supervisor and the supervisor was like, yeah, whatever. And like half the staff was laid off next week. But and they got rid of a bunch of instruments because no one was COVID testing. And yeah, these things happen. But the point is, I was not asked to do this. I did this in spare time that other people maybe were checking their phones because there really was nothing to do. So it didn't interfere with my work. And I wanted something that I could put on my resume. So sometimes you have to look for experiences that will look good on your resume that, I don't like training people, but I know it looks good on a resume. So when the opportunity comes up, I train new employees. And I don't plan on pursuing a leadership role from right now. But if I ever do, want to pursue a leadership role, then training employees is training new hires is something that's very good to put on your resume to say, I want to be a supervisor. I have experience training employees, or I have experience running the lab when, like, being team lead on the weekends when the regular lead is not there. Whatever. Sometimes you got to look for the experiences. Yeah, this one was they called it a molecular technologist, and anything that's short. So this is only like 2-3 months, right? So this was a travel assignment. They said they wanted a travel technologist, and anything that's short, I say, this is why. So it doesn't look like I slack off. In fact, it looks really good because I really like the travel assignment because I trained on different testing methods in 3 weeks. So my first job, I was doing one test for like a year, and then they trained me on something else because I was in a high volume reference laboratory, and so that didn't look good on a resume, right? I've worked like a whole year and I've only done one test. But with the travel assignment, they trained me on like 3 different testing methods in 3 weeks. I like the number 3, so that sounds cool. And this is what I tested for. Helped out with specimen processing because you remember the job listing, so they wanted someone who has experience with specimen processing. So, okay. And then, like, sometimes they'll say they want someone who prepares reagents. That's part of your job description. So here, yeah, I helped prepare reagents. If you have other jobs, that's fine too. I worked as tech support, not in New York, but as an example. So I worked in tech support in university, and so even though this wasn't a medical technology experience, I could still say I have work experience and I'm reliable, right? Because I've had a job before. So even if you have jobs that don't really apply to medical technology, you should list them and then think of the things that, like, this shows that I have computer skills. Yeah. Undergrad research assistant. This was only a summer internship, so that's why it's only a couple months. And this is what I did. I did microscopy, and then again presented finding, like, it wasn't that big a deal, but I presented findings to a research program and submitted a written report. And this is going to show, like, I can use this later if I want to apply for like team lead or supervisor that says, well, I can make written reports. References, I put the name, and I like to use the most recent people. I don't like to be pulling from university if I've been like 5 years on the job field, like in the job. Doesn't make sense. And then the contact information. Always ask someone before you leave a job or if you're looking for a position if they can be your reference. The nice thing about doing the short-term travel assignments is that you're only there for 3 months, right? It's usually 3 months, usually for FMLA, usually because someone's pregnant. Good times. Anyways, so you're only there for 3 months. You can see how it is in the lab, and it's kind of like a trial run for you and for the employer. And if they like you and there's an opening come up, then it's good to keep that connection. Maybe you can get a job there. And if not, you can be applying for other jobs the day you start your travel assignment. Like, they know you're going to be there for 3 months and then you are going to leave. So when I was working a travel assignment, like, I asked the supervisor, hey, would you be willing to be a reference for me when I'm looking for other jobs? And that's nice because maybe not on day one, you don't ask. But after I'd been there, a couple of months, I was nearing the end, and they were like, yeah, sure, I wish you the best. You did a good job working, whatever. So that's nice. And I like to have 3 because 3 is a good number. Professors, if you have to, it's better to have someone like who's actually seen you in the lab. So maybe not even a supervisor, but a team lead. If you can't list a supervisor, or if you've only worked at one company or if you're on your one travel assignment, right? You want to have the supervisor and the team lead be your references, so you have 2 references to go into your first like full-time job. That's fine. So that's how I set it up, and I will link a copy to this below. So good luck in all of your medical laboratory science journeys. I wish you the best and may all your QCs pass.